Preference and fantasy, beyond habit and impulse, desire speaks the language of the psyche. It reveals what the conscious mind often hides: your unmet needs, your unlived potentials, your wounds, and your longing for wholeness. We like to believe desire is simple, biological, or accidental, but nothing that grips the soul so deeply is ever simple. Desire arises from the same inner source as dreams, fears, and creativity. It carries symbols. It points towards something missing, something seeking expression. What you are drawn to is rarely about the surface object. It is about what that object represents within you. Often, sexual desire intensifies around qualities we have disowned. Power, surrender, tenderness, danger, devotion. These energies may be suppressed in daily life, forced into the shadows by conditioning or expectation. Desire becomes the stage where these buried parts finally speak. What excites you may reveal what you have been denied permission to be. This is why desire can feel both compelling and confusing. It exposes contradictions: the wish to be seen and the fear of exposure, the hunger for control and the craving to let go. Desire does not judge these tensions, it simply reveals them. It shows you where your inner life is divided and where integration is possible. When ignored or shamed, desire becomes compulsive. It demands expression in distorted ways. But when approached with awareness, it becomes informative. Sexual desire is not a moral statement, it is a psychological message. To listen to it is not to obey blindly, but to understand deeply. As you decode its symbols, you reclaim lost parts of yourself. Desire then matures, from compulsion into connection, from fantasy into presence, from fragmentation into wholeness. In this way, your desire is not pulling you away from your true self, it is pointing you toward it. Sexual desire is often reduced to chemistry, hormones, and instinct, yet this explanation only touches the surface of a far deeper psychological process. While biology provides the energy, it does not determine the meaning. Desire attaches itself to images, traits, dynamics, and fantasies that go far beyond reproduction or physical pleasure. This is because desire is shaped by the inner world as much as the body. It emerges from memory, emotion, identity, and unresolved experience. What arouses interest is rarely random. It is selected by the psyche as a symbol of something lacking, hidden, or undeveloped within the individual. From early life onward, the psyche forms associations between feeling and meaning. Moments of safety, intensity, admiration, fear, or longing become encoded long before they are understood consciously. Sexual desire later draws from this inner archive. A person may find themselves magnetically pulled toward confidence, vulnerability, authority, gentleness, or danger, not because these traits are sexually functional in a biological sense, but because they carry psychological charge. Desire seeks completion. It moves toward qualities the conscious personality has not fully integrated or allowed itself to live. This is why desire often contradicts self-image. Someone who appears controlled may crave surrender. Someone who identifies as strong may desire care or protection. Someone outwardly agreeable may feel drawn to defiance or power. These attractions are symbolic compensations. The psyche uses desire to restore balance where consciousness has become one-sided. What is pushed down in waking life returns through longing, fantasy, and attraction, asking to be acknowledged rather than acted out blindly. Cultural conditioning also shapes desire symbolically. What is forbidden, shamed, idealized, or exaggerated by society acquires psychic intensity. Desire then becomes a meeting point between personal history and collective influence. Yet even here, the biological explanation falls short. Two people raised in similar conditions can desire entirely different things. Use symbolism is personal. The psyche does not respond to rules but to meaning. Desire follows emotional truth, not social logic. When desire is misunderstood as purely biological, people either repress it or overindulge it. Repression turns desire into guilt and secrecy. Overindulgence turns it into compulsion. In both cases, the symbolic message is missed. Desire is not demanding satisfaction as much as it is requesting interpretation. It asks what part of the self is seeking expression, healing, or recognition. Without this inquiry, desire repeats itself, growing louder and more confusing over time. Understanding desire symbolically does not mean acting on every impulse. It means listening to what the impulse represents. A fantasy of closeness may point to emotional isolation. A craving for intensity may signal numbness in daily life. A pull toward admiration may reflect an unlived sense of worth. When these meanings are brought into awareness, desire often changes form. It becomes less urgent, less fragmented, and more integrated into conscious life. In this sense, sexual desire is one of the psyche's most honest languages. It bypasses rational defenses and reveals truth through attraction. Biology provides the spark, but symbolism provides the direction. To understand desire psychologically is to see it not as a problem to control, but as a message inviting deeper self-knowledge. Desire often points toward what the conscious personality has pushed aside, neglected, or forbidden. From early life, individuals learn which traits are acceptable and which are not. Certain emotions, behaviors, or needs are rewarded, while others are met with disapproval, shame, or withdrawal of affection. Over time, the psyche adapts by shaping an outward identity that fits these expectations. What does not fit is not destroyed, it is buried. Desire becomes one of the primary ways these disowned aspects continue to seek expression. What attracts us is frequently what we are not allowed to be. A person raised to value restraint may feel drawn to abandon. Someone taught to be agreeable may desire dominance or intensity. Someone conditioned to prioritize strength may crave vulnerability or care. These attractions are not accidents or moral failures, they are symbolic compensations. The psyche seeks balance, and when consciousness becomes too narrow, desire expands in the opposite direction to restore psychological equilibrium. This is why desire can feel unsettling. It exposes inner contradictions that challenge the self-image. People often ask why they want what they want, especially when it conflicts with their values or social roles. The discomfort arises not from desire itself, but from what it reveals. Desire shines light on qualities that have been split off to maintain belonging, safety, or approval. It becomes the voice of the unseen self asking to be acknowledged. Suppressed parts do not remain passive. When denied conscious recognition, they gather energy in the unconscious. Desire carries this energy because it bypasses rational control. It speaks in images, fantasies, and emotional charge rather than logic. The more a trait is suppressed, the more intensely it may appear in attraction. What is ignored in daylight often appears vividly in longing, fascination, or erotic imagination. Projection plays a central role in this process. Disowned qualities are often perceived and desired in others. A person may idealize confidence, creativity, or freedom in a partner while remaining disconnected from those same qualities within themselves. Desire then becomes externally focused, creating dependency or obsession. The individual believes the other holds what they lack, not realizing the attraction points inward toward an undeveloped part of the self. When these dynamics remain unconscious, desire can become repetitive and unsatisfying. The same patterns return because the underlying psychological message has not been integrated. Relatio. Friendships may begin with intensity and end with disappointment once the projection collapses. This is not because desire was wrong, but because its symbolic meaning was not understood. The psyche was pointing toward inner growth, not permanent external completion. Recognizing desire as a mirror of the disowned self changes its function. Instead of being driven by it, one can learn from it. This awareness allows suppressed traits to be integrated consciously, reducing their compulsive pull. Desire then becomes less dramatic, less urgent, and more relational. In this way, desire serves as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious. It reveals where the psyche has been divided and where wholeness is possible. By listening rather than judging, the individual recovers lost aspects of themselves, transforming desire from a source of confusion into a guide toward inner integration. What excites you is rarely about the external object alone. It is a reflection of something unfinished within your inner life. Excitement carries emotional charge, and emotional charge arises where there is deprivation, tension, or longing. Psychological needs that remain unmet do not disappear. They seek symbolic fulfillment. Desire becomes the language through which these unmet needs announce themselves, often bypassing logic and self-control to reach awareness. From childhood onward, certain needs may be delayed, denied, or distorted. Needs for validation, safety, autonomy, affection, power, or rest are shaped by environment and relationship. When these needs are not adequately met, the psyche adapts, sometimes by suppressing them to maintain stability or belonging. Yet suppression does not resolve need, it merely removes it from conscious negotiation. Excitement later forms around situations, traits, or dynamics that promise the experience that was missing. This is why excitement often feels charged with urgency. It is not only attraction, it is compensation. A person who lacked emotional attunement may feel intense excitement around closeness or being deeply seen. Someone who grew up feeling controlled may be aroused by freedom, risk, or rebellion. Someone whose worth was conditional may crave admiration or exclusivity. These responses are not flaws, they are signals. The psyche is highlighting where nourishment is still required. Excitement also tends to exaggerate what is missing. Because the need has gone unmet for so long, it becomes idealized. The desired object or experience appears powerful, almost magical, as if it alone could resolve inner tension. This creates intensity that feels disproportionate to reality. The excitement is not about what is present, but about what has been absent. The psyche loads desire with hope, imagining completion where there has been lack. When unmet needs remain unconscious, excitement can lead to repetitive patterns. The individual may pursue the same type of person or situation again and again, feeling briefly fulfilled and then disappointed. This cycle continues because the external experience cannot permanently satisfy an internal need that has not been acknowledged. Excitement promises relief, but without awareness, it cannot deliver integration. Understanding excitement psychologically changes its role. Instead of being chased or feared, it becomes informative. Excitement for intensity may reveal emotional numbness. Excitement for control may reveal insecurity. Excitement for surrender may reveal exhaustion from constant self-management. These insights allow the underlying needs to be addressed more directly and consciously. As unmet needs are recognized and gradually met through self-awareness, boundaries, and authentic connection, excitement often softens. It does not disappear, but it becomes less compulsive and less idealized. Desire aligns more closely with reality rather than fantasy. In this way, excitement functions as a psychological compass. It does not point outward toward objects of fulfillment, but inward toward the places where the psyche is asking to be cared for, understood, and completed. When desire remains unconscious, it does not remain quiet. What is ignored in the psyche does not dissolve, it gathers pressure. Desire that is unexamined and unacknowledged seeks expression through repetition, urgency, and intensity. Compulsion is not the presence of desire, but the absence of awareness. The psyche repeats what consciousness refuses to hear, increasing the volume until attention is forced. Ignoring desire often begins as a strategy for control. Individuals may dismiss certain longings as inappropriate, dangerous, or irrational. Cultural norms, moral frameworks, or fear of consequence encourage suppression rather than understanding. Yet desire does not operate on moral logic. When pushed away, it moves underground, where it loses nuance and flexibility. What could have been informative becomes rigid. What could have been integrated becomes compulsive. Compulsion arises because the symbolic meaning of desire has not been recognized. The psyche uses repetition as a teaching mechanism. When the message is missed, it is sent again in stronger form. This is why people often find themselves drawn to the same patterns despite conscious resistance. The attraction feels involuntary, urgent, and difficult to regulate. The individual experiences desire as something happening to them rather than something arising from within them. Unconscious desire also bypasses choice. Without reflection, the person is pulled by impulse rather than guided by understanding. This creates cycles of indulgence followed by guilt or shame, reinforcing the belief that desire is the problem. In reality, the problem is disconnection. Desire has become compulsive because it has been stripped of meaning. The psyche is attempting to resolve an inner imbalance without conscious cooperation. Shame intensifies this cycle. When desire is judged rather than explored, it becomes secretive. Secrecy removes relational context, making desire more abstract and extreme. Fantasy replaces dialogue. The individual becomes isolated with their longing, increasing its power. What is hidden grows stronger, not weaker. Compulsion thrives in darkness because there is no reflective surface to soften it. Compulsive desire often escalates over time. What once produced satisfaction becomes insufficient, leading to greater intensity or novelty. This escalation is not about pleasure, but about frustration. The psyche is attempting to reach completion through quantity rather than understanding. Without insight, desire keeps searching externally for what must be addressed internally. Awareness interrupts compulsion. When desire is brought into consciousness, its urgency changes. Naming it creates distance without suppression. Understanding its emotional and symbolic roots restores choice. The individual can ask what need, wound, or disowned aspect is being expressed. As meaning emerges, desire often loses its compulsive edge. It becomes quieter, more flexible, and more relational. Compulsion is therefore not a sign of excess desire, but of neglected dialogue with the inner world. Desire becomes overwhelming only when it is treated as an enemy or embarrassment. When approached with curiosity rather than fear, it reveals its purpose. The psyche does not seek to enslave the individual through desire, it seeks to be heard. Awareness changes the function of desire from something that happens to a person into something that speaks to them. When desire is left unexamined, it feels external, intrusive, and often confusing. It pulls attention outward toward objects, people, or fantasies, creating the illusion that fulfillment lies somewhere else. Awareness turns this movement inward. Instead of being driven by desire, the individual begins to listen to it, and in listening, desire reveals its psychological content. To become aware of desire is not to suppress or indulge it, but to observe it without immediate reaction. This pause is transformative. It allows the individual to notice patterns, what consistently attracts attention, what triggers intensity, what evokes urgency or fantasy. These patterns are not random, they form a map of the inner life. Awareness reveals that desire is structured, shaped by memory, emotion, and identity. It begins to speak in recognizable themes rather than chaotic impulses. As awareness deepens, desire shifts from demand to information. The individual can ask what emotional state accompanies it. Loneliness, excitement, fear, longing, relief. Desire often points toward what consciousness has neglected. A longing for closeness may reflect emotional distance in waking life. A craving for intensity may indicate numbness or routine. A pull toward admiration may reveal a fragile sense of worth. Awareness uncovers these connections, transforming desire into a diagnostic tool for self-understanding. This process also reduces projection. Without awareness, people unconsciously place their unmet needs onto others, believing that another person embodies what they lack. Awareness retrieves these projections, recognizing that the attraction reflects inner potential or deprivation. The other becomes less mythologized, and the self becomes more accountable for its own growth. Desire no longer demands completion from the outside world, it points inward toward integration. With awareness, desire becomes less urgent and less compulsive. Urgency thrives on unconsciousness. When the meaning of desire is unknown, it insists on expression through action. Once understood, it can be held, reflected upon, and responded to consciously. The individual gains choice. Desire does not disappear, but it becomes more proportionate, more relational, and more grounded in reality. Self-knowledge grows as desire is repeatedly met with attention rather than avoidance. Each instance of awareness strengthens the connection between conscious identity and unconscious material. The individual becomes familiar with their inner landscape, recognizing recurring needs and themes. Desire becomes one of the psyche's most reliable messengers, offering insight into emotional development and psychological balance. This transformation does not make desire less powerful, it makes it more meaningful. Instead of fragmenting the self, desire becomes a unifying force. It links body and psyche, instinct and reflection, longing and understanding. Awareness allows desire to fulfill its deeper function, not merely to seek pleasure but to reveal truth. Integration of desire means allowing longing to take its rightful place within the total personality, rather than isolating it as something separate, shameful, or dangerous. When desire is split off from conscious identity, the psyche becomes divided. One part of the self manages daily life according to rules, roles, and expectations, while another part carries unexpressed vitality, fantasy, and emotional truth. Psychological wholeness begins when these parts are no longer at war but are brought into dialogue. Desire carries life energy. When it is rejected or denied, that energy does not disappear, it distorts. It may turn into anxiety, irritability, depression, or compulsive behavior. The individual feels fragmented, driven by forces they do not understand or trust. Integration restores continuity. Desire is no longer experienced as an intruder, but as a natural expression of the same psyche that thinks, chooses, and reflects. To integrate desire is not to act it out indiscriminately, but to recognize its meaning and rightful limits. Integration requires awareness, honesty, and responsibility. The individual learns to distinguish between impulse and intention. Desire is examined for what it symbolizes, what need it carries, and what quality of self it seeks to express. This process allows desire to be related to values rather than opposed to them. When desire is understood, it can be shaped rather than suppressed. Psychological wholeness emerges as opposites are reconciled. Strength integrates vulnerability, control integrates surrender, independence integrates connection. Desire often lives in the neglected pole of these oppositions. By integrating desire, the personality becomes more flexible and less rigid. The individual no longer needs to defend a narrow self-image. There is more internal space, less tension, and greater emotional range. Relationships also change through integration. When desire is unconscious, it fuels projection and dependency. Others are burdened with carrying disowned aspects of the self. Integration withdraws these projections. Attraction becomes less about completion and more about genuine encounter. The individual can relate from fullness rather than lack. Desire becomes connective instead of consuming. Wholeness does not mean the absence of conflict, but the capacity to hold inner tensions without fragmentation. Integrated desire contributes to this capacity. It brings instinct and reflection into cooperation. The individual feels more real, more embodied, and more aligned. There is less inner contradiction and less need for secrecy or shame. As desire is integrated, vitality returns in a grounded form. Creativity, intimacy, and meaning flow more freely. The psyche no longer expends energy on repression or compulsive repetition. That energy becomes available for growth and expression. Psychological wholeness is felt as coherence, a sense that one's inner life is not divided against itself. In this state, desire no longer demands escape or excess. It becomes a source of guidance rather than disruption. Integrated desire affirms life without overpowering it. It connects the individual to their depth, their humanity, and their capacity for conscious choice. In the end, desire is not something to conquer, silence, or outgrow. It is something to understand. When listened to with honesty, desire reveals the hidden architecture of the psyche, where it is divided, where it is starving, and where it is ready to become whole. What once felt like temptation or confusion becomes guidance. The moment desire is met with awareness rather than fear, it stops pulling you away from yourself and begins leading you back. Wholeness is not achieved by denying what moves you, but by integrating it, allowing every part of your inner life to have a conscious place. When desire is no longer exiled, the self is no longer fragmented, and a deeper, quieter sense of completeness emerges.